What you are about to hear is the true story of how the children of victims and the children of perpetrators came to know the story of the other. A stranger is someone whose story I do not know. If you hear only one story, if you read only one story, if you have no opportunity for any other story, then you become very impressed with what you are told. It is impossible to make up your own mind because you have no mind of your own. Can you imagine this? This was my childhood, the childhood of a single story, for the dictatorship allows only one story, their story. The spring I entered kindergarten, all literature that was impure was purged. Students and soldiers burned books we did not need. We needed only one story. Perhaps you choose to believe that children are taught how to think. I was taught what was right, to believe the one and only story. My school day began when the priest came in and said, "Heil Hitler." Then he would say, "Good morning, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." Only after the priest praised Hitler before God could school begin. My name is Alfons Heck. I was born in 1928 in the town of Wittlich in Germany. I lived with my grandparents on their small farm. Unlike my elders, I never knew a Germany without Nazis. I only knew the story told by the Nazis. As far as I was concerned, it was the one and only story. Before I was born, Germany had lost World War I. Germans staggered from this loss. We wanted a strong leader to take control, restore our honor, a leader to deliver us from the evils that surrounded us. That leader emerged. His name was Adolf Hitler, der Führer, the guide. Hitler touched my life in personal ways. My first friend, Heinz Ehrmann, and I walked to school together. Heinz was a Jew. Shortly after school began, Hitler enacted the law of overcrowding of German schools. With this law, Heinz and all other Jews were no longer able to attend our schools. I missed walking to school with my friend, but I did not question the law. Twice a week, we studied racial science, where we learned of the inferiority of the non-Aryan. Aryan, it was a new word to us. We learned that there is a superior shape to the Aryan skull, a superior color to the Aryan eye and hair. We knew that Jews, Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the handicapped were inferior to us, the master race, the Aryans. Hitler brought together the Aryan children by creating Hitlerjugend, Hitler Youth. In Hitlerjugend, Aryan children wore uniforms, went hiking, sang songs, planted gardens, made things for kindergartens and old people. I was not forced to join Hitlerjugend. I could not wait to join. I was not alone. In 1933, 1 year after Hitler became chancellor, Hitlerjugend numbered 3.5 million German children. By 1939, 8 million Aryan boys and girls were members of Hitlerjugend. One spring evening, I watched a torchlight parade of Hitlerjugend and stormtroopers. Music of a military band fills the air. The streets are draped with red flags with the black swastika in the white circle. People hang from balconies and windows shouting, "Heil Hitler! Sieg Heil!" And then for the first time I lay my eyes on Adolf Hitler. Here is the man building for us a new Germany. On this night, I am just as certain as Hitler that the Third Reich will last 1,000 years. On Adolf Hitler's 49th birthday, I am sworn into Hitlerjugend. I promise in the Hitlerjugend to do my duty at all times in love and faithfulness to help der Führer, so help me God. Our banner means more to us than death. The bond of a 9-year-old child, my bond of death to Adolf Hitler. There was little distinction between my bond to Adolf Hitler and my bond to Jesus Christ. I was an altar boy. I served Mass wearing full Hitlerjugend uniform, including dagger and swastika. I wore this under my altar boy robes. At the age of 10, I was selected to attend the Nazi Party Congress in Nuremberg. 80,000 Hitlerjugend line the stadium. When Hitler appears, we greet him with a thundering, "Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil!" As he speaks, Adolf Hitler seems to stare right at me. Meine Jugend, my youth, you are our most precious guarantee for a great future. You are destined to be leaders of a glorious new order under National Socialism. Meine Jugend, my youth, never forget that one day you will rule the world. For minutes we shout at the tops of our lungs, tears stream down our faces. Sieg Heil! From this moment on, I belong to Adolf Hitler, body and soul. For me, Germany was a joy. For others, it was a nightmare. The Nazi Party paper proclaimed, "Jews, abandon all hope. Our net is so fine there is not a hole through which you can slip." My former friend, Heinz Ehrmann, took this warning to heart, trying to slip through the ever-tightening net. He came to our farm to say goodbye. My grandmother gave us a piece of cake, normally a Sunday treat. We shook hands awkwardly. We both knew our friendship had ended. Later, when I had to go through interviews for promotion in Hitlerjugend, I always denied ever having had a Jew for a friend. November 9, 1938. On my way home from school, I watched stormtroopers jump off trucks and smash the windows of every Jewish business in Wittlich. They break into the synagogue. The window above the door crashes into the street. Pieces of furniture fly through the window. A stormtrooper climbs to the roof of the synagogue and releases the rolls of the Torah, the Jewish religious scrolls. "Wipe your asses with it!" he screams. Some turn away. I stay. With this, the Kristallnacht, night of broken glass, the age of German innocence was over. No one would ever be able to say that we did not know what was in store for the Jews. When Heinz Ehrmann's mother was forced to leave Wittlich, I said to my grandmother, "Jews are being shipped to Poland to pay for their crimes by working the land." Later in my life, thinking of Auschwitz as a farm would seem absurd, grotesque. But at that moment, it was perfectly believable to me. When the war turned badly, military training of Hitlerjugend stepped up. Rifles were nothing new to us. From the age of 10, we had been instructed in small caliber weapons. But now we learned to throw live hand grenades and fire bazookas. The action was getting closer. I was promoted to Scharführer in command of 50 boys. When the Allies invaded Normandy, Hitlerjugend were told, we are to defend the Siegfried Line, a line of defense along Germany's western border. I was named Gefolgsstafführer in command of 150 boys. We operated anti-aircraft guns. I was 16. My commander hands me a new pistol. A gift from me, he says. But remember, if you ever let me down, you'd better use it on yourself. With the battlefield death of the Hitlerjugend commander, I was named Unterbannführer in command of 2,800 children soldiers. My commander warns me, make sure your units don't panic at the sound of gunfire. A Hitlerjugend leader was shot by the Gestapo for pulling back from artillery. I'm warning you, Heck, the Gestapo is more dangerous than the Americans. Late one evening, I am informed by an SS officer to be prepared to be picked up early the next morning. He will not say why. At 6 a.m., a camouflaged colored Mercedes arrives. I climb inside. Where are we going? I ask the driver. No answer. After several miles, we come to an armored train surrounded by SS soldiers. The train is filled with military commanders and leaders of Hitlerjugend. After a few minutes, the door opens and in walks Adolf Hitler. My heart pounds. Here is the only man still able to rally our people. He looks old, frail, quite pale. As he lifts his right arm, we roar, "Heil mein Führer!" And a smile flickers across his lips. As he speaks, his pale blue eyes seem to bore directly into mine, just as they did when I was a 10-year-old in Nuremberg. We shall destroy the enemy at the very gates to the fatherland. This is where we split the Allies once and for all. Before he leaves, Adolf Hitler shakes my hand. His hand feels warm and sweaty, with little firmness. Adolf Hitler says to me, "I know I can depend on you, my boy." Jawohl, mein Führer. I know that nothing else in the rest of my life will ever equal this day. When the Allies broke through the Siegfried Line, I was ordered to return to Wittlich. Christmas Eve, 1944. As I leave our farm heading into town, I pat my dog Prince on the head. When I get back, I tell him, I'll take you and Felix, our horse, for a walk. I stroll into the stable and stroke Felix's mane. As I enter town, the clock tower strikes 2:30. Suddenly, sirens sound the high alarm. Out of the western sky roar a wedge of bombers. I race inside an air raid shelter. The lights go out. Dust and chunks of ceiling rain down, making breathing very hard. Shrieks of terror fill the shelter. Then the explosions stop. I check my watch. 2:45. In 15 minutes, much of Wittlich was destroyed. Not a pane of glass is left in any building. The center of town is a fiery inferno. I race home. It is a mass of flaming rubble. The fires smolder for 3 days. A sickening smell hangs in the air. I lift up a dead chicken and see a paw underneath. I uncover the body of my dog Prince. Felix, my horse, is nearby. I cry until I think my heart will break. I burn with hatred. So you damned Americans want total war? I'll make you pay for Prince and Felix. I realize I no longer care deeply for people. My animals mean much more to me. With the Allies closing in on Germany, I was named Bannführer, in command of 6,000 children soldiers. When informed of my promotion, I said to my commander, "But that's impossible. I'm not even 17. He shrugs. "So what? For asking 12-year-olds to attack enemy tanks." I am ordered to take my troops to the front lines. Shortly after dawn, we see the turret of an American tank. The tank opens fire on us. Everyone in my trenches fires back wildly. We hear the cries of men as they are hit. Cannon and machine gun fire turn our trenches into sand-filled wreckage. When it is over, I am proud that my boys so willingly risked their lives for the fatherland. We salute 2 of our young comrades who died during this action. Their families probably cried for them, but we did not. We had seen too much death. Too many of our friends had been killed. I grieve more for my dog Prince and my gentle horse Felix. They were innocent victims. After all, they never pledged their lives to Adolf Hitler. I was ordered to return to Wittlich. The morning after my arrival, American Sherman tanks pull in, followed by long lines of infantry. I quickly bury my uniform and put on a pair of dirty overalls. I walk past tank after tank after tank and arouse not the slightest bit of attention. I realize the Americans have simply taken me for a child. Later, the French become the army of occupation. Soldiers arrest me and herd me down the main street. By the time they shove me through the gate of the Wittlich Penitentiary, my backside is black and blue from blows from their rifle butts. I'm thrown into a cell filled with Nazi party members and leaders of Hitlerjugend. Soldiers armed with submachine guns stop in front of our cage. A French captain proclaims in broken German, "By order of the French military government in Germany, you will be executed tomorrow at 0600 hours to pay for crimes committed in France." I cry. I pray. Why me? What have I done? I ask myself. And then, for the first time, I feel betrayed by the man who had become my God. But Hitler was dead, along with 2.5 million German children who worshipped him. Near midnight, I called to a French soldier. "Could you arrange for me to see a priest? I would like to go to confession." "Don't worry," he says. "You won't be shot. Not yet, anyway. The captain wanted to have some fun with you." During captivity, we were forced to watch films of death camps. When we saw the piles of corpses, we simply refused to believe. The photos were obviously fakes, taken to make us feel guilty. They could not possibly be real. We began to snicker. The French were outraged and beat us severely with their rifle butts. But nothing they did changed our minds. It would be many months before I would begin to believe the truth about the Holocaust. Eventually, I was released by the French, but I wanted an answer to the question, why had a generation of German children followed Adolf Hitler so blindly? The answer came when I attended the War Crimes Tribunal in Nuremberg. One of the Nazis on trial, Baldur von Schirach, was leader of Hitlerjugend. It was Schirach I admired most next to Hitler. Schirach, who idolized Hitler, testified at the War Crimes Tribunal. I organized for Hitler a group of youth who would look up to him as I did. It is my guilt that I trained them for a man who became a murderer 1,000,000 times over. Schirach was sentenced to 20 years in prison for crimes against humanity. I felt by extension that I had been sentenced as well. In 1950, I left Germany and eventually settled in San Diego, California. It was there that I wrote articles in the local newspaper about my life in Hitlerjugend. One day in 1980, I received a telephone call from a woman. Mr. Heck, my name is Helen Wohlfarth. I was born in 1909 in Germany, just 60 miles from your birthplace. Despite the small geographic distance, our lives were very different. You were born to Catholic parents, I to Jews. This circumstance, the religious identity of our parents, would play a very big role in our lives. Growing up in Germany, I was a happy teenager, and then I went to university, something my mother never understood. She wanted me to get married as soon as possible. My husband, she said, must be German, Jewish, and rich. One summer she found the perfect choice for me. He was 32, I was 16, and did not want to get married to this old man. So I behaved in a very obnoxious manner. I did not want to get married then. I wanted to study and maybe to teach. I wanted to spend evenings with my friends. He liked to discuss politics, go to horse races, and irritate our parents by wearing very unattractive clothes. A few years later, however, I met Siegfried, the man I chose to marry. In 1933, life for Jews in Germany was very hard. Siegfried and I decided to leave Germany, and we moved to Amsterdam, Holland, where we hoped for a fresh beginning. In early 1937, we learned that our dreams for a child would come true. On October 28, 1937, Doris was born. She was one of 4 children born to our close circle of friends in Amsterdam that year. 5 happy couples with 4 healthy babies. Just 8 years later, at the end of the war, only 4 of the 14 of us would still be alive. In 1940, the Nazis invaded Holland, and with that, our lives were in danger. We knew that we must go into hiding, and this meant that we would have to give up our little girl, for children could not be expected to live 24 hours a day inside a small room, never allowed to go outside. We wanted 3-year-old Doris to have every chance to live, even if it were not possible for us. And this meant that we would have to send her away to live with a non-Jewish family. To make the separation easier, we began to distance ourselves from her. We stopped holding her. We stopped hugging her. We stopped kissing her. It was very hard to treat our own child this way, but we thought that it was best. I do not know if this was right, but who can judge at such moments? our good and righteous friends, the Roinsinks, who happened to be Christian, found a family that would take Doris in. We did not know the name of this family, and we did not know where they lived, because it would be safer for everyone if we did not know. And then the Roinsinks found a place for me and Siegfried to hide. But we were betrayed, captured by the Gestapo, forced into a cattle car. The destination was Auschwitz, the largest, most efficient factory of murder in the history of the human race. I cannot say how many people in our cattle car alone died during this trip. When the doors to our cattle car were thrown open, the shouting was unbelievable. The chaos was everywhere. The Nazis created this on purpose to upset us and then used our behavior as an excuse to beat and shoot us. It did not take us long to realize the full truth of our situation. We had been brought here to die. A number of us tattooed to my left forearm, A25254. For the duration of my captivity, this was my identity. I saw women hanged in camps for reasons I could only guess, if there were any reasons. Often during roll call, we were forced to kneel on gravel, our hands held high in the air. There could be no movement, no drink of water, no permission to use the bathroom. Despite the filth in the camps, I tried to keep myself clean. Every day I would water down my body in any way that I could. It helped me to feel as if I was still an important person with a body worth caring for. And in the winter, I would wash my face using a handful of snow. Somehow I survived and was liberated. I sensed very deeply that Doris was still alive, and I knew that I had to find her. I was a 70-pound human skeleton and set off the next day with no directions, no transportation other than my feet. Eventually, I arrived at a displaced persons camp near the border of Holland and learned that a truck was coming the next morning. When the truck arrived, I was the first one to climb aboard. Of course, I did not have the proper papers, and the driver ordered me to get down. When I refused, he called to several men to remove me. I said to them, I have not been spared in Auschwitz to fight for my rights in vain. I plan to find my child, and if you try to stop me, my screams will make you ashamed for the rest of your lives. The truck took me to Amsterdam. When I arrived, I went to the house where I hoped my friends, the Roinsinks, still lived. They were home. Amidst all the hugging and crying and laughter, I heard only 3 words. Doris is fine. My friends promised to take me to her the next morning. Now that I knew that Doris was alive, I was afraid what the next day would bring. How would she react to me, the skeleton of a woman with hedgehog hair? Would she even recognize me? After all, it had been 3 years, half her life since she had last seen me. And during that time, she had lived with another family. Why would she want to leave them and come with me, a woman she barely knew? To make matters worse, I had no job, no money, no place to live. But life had taught me to live, moment by moment, and in this moment I knew only that I had to see Doris. The next day, the Roinsinks took me to the town where Doris lived. We drove in a military jeep. When we arrived, it was lunchtime. Doris was sitting at the table eating. She spent a long time looking at the jeep, not at me. She said, "I've never seen a jeep before." She acted as if I was not there. She said to my friends stories about her school and her friends. Suddenly she turned to me and said in Dutch, using the formal way of addressing a stranger, "Are you my mother?" I took several steps closer to her. "Yes, I am your mother," I said. But what I wanted to do was to take her into my arms and hold her. But I was afraid of losing her just at the moment that I found her. In the end, Doris saved the situation by saying, "I must go back to school." And she said to the Roinsinks, "Could you take me to school in the jeep? I would like to have all my friends see the jeep." I felt as if she wanted no one to see her mother. The next day I took Doris with me. All that I knew was that I was drowning in a world that had no place for me, and I felt that taking care of my own child would give me the strength to go on. The Roinsinks found an attic for us. It had no kitchen, no bathroom, no furniture, but it was 2 rooms just for us. Doris was awake every night, crying, vomiting, obviously very unhappy. I took her to see the doctor, but he had no answers. One particularly upsetting day, after I scolded her, she screamed at me, "I wish you had never come back." We both cried. I needed a job and heard of one in a foster care home for Dutch children. The parents of these children were in prison for having helped the Nazis. These innocent children reminded me of our own Jewish children who were taken from us and in the end were murdered. The foster care home needed a house mother, I needed a job, and I was afraid that because these children were growing up in a world that hated them, that they too would grow up to hate. We had heard nothing of Siegfried, and my parents, who had made it to the United States, wanted us to come to be close to them. And so in 1947, we left Amsterdam and we moved to the United States and eventually settled in San Diego, California. Many years later, I learned that Siegfried had died at the hands of the Nazis. I had sensed this, but it was good to know, to put him to rest, to go on with my life. In 1980, I read articles in the local newspaper written by Alfons Heck. He was different from other Germans who denied their pasts. He had the courage to write publicly of his. I had to meet him. I did not realize how surprised he'd be to get a call from a Jewish death camp survivor. I did not know what to say. Former Nazis and Hitlerjugend just didn't talk to Jewish death camp survivors. But Helen was different. Helen had the courage to reach out to a once deadly foe, something that was unthinkable for me. Helen was different from other survivors who appeared to hate all Germans, even those who had served Hitler willingly. I had to meet her. We met, we spoke, and we decided that together we would tell our stories. And together, for the next 10 years, we told our stories to school children, college students, at churches and synagogues, to radio and television audiences. Many Jews branded me a traitor. They assumed I had forgiven Al. There is nothing for me to forgive. Alphonse Heck was born into the Nazi system as a child. He was not an adult with mature judgment. I don't blame him. People expected me to hate Al as if hating Al was something natural. The truth is, I never hated any Nazi, even the Gestapo that arrested me in Siegfried. People could not believe that I did not hate all Germans as I had felt their power firsthand. They asked me, "What do you expect to gain by not hating?" And this is what I said to them. Hate is a boomerang that destroys the sender. I want to build peace, not feed the flames of a never-ending destruction. One day, when we were speaking to a group of young people, a young man asked Al, "Mr. Heck, would you have shot Mrs. Wolfarth if you had been ordered to?" I'm afraid, young man, the answer is yes. To refuse a direct order was simply unthinkable. When the program was over, I said to Helen, "I'm sorry you had to hear that question and my answer, but I felt he deserved an honest answer." Helen said to me, "If you had said anything else, our partnership would have been over. I could never have trusted you to ever tell the truth." Al and I told our stories, the stories of a victim and the stories of a perpetrator. We planted the seeds so that the children of victims and the children of perpetrators could tell their stories to each other. These children created an organization called Von by Von. One by one, we pick up the pieces of devastation, and one by one, we identify those who were lost in genocide and war. One by one, we seek out the humanity in each other as we listen to one another's stories of pain, guilt, anguish, loss, and fear. And as the stories resound within us, the burdens are lightened, the heart opens, and the vision of what we can be to one another is born. And the vision of what we can be to one another is born.